Good morning. This is Sunday morning. Here every week, it's the integration layer of whatever the week's theme has stirred up. The podcast is kind of the neuroscience, right? It gets a little deeper into the neuroscience. The Spark newsletter, if you read it on LinkedIn, is really what gives you insight and what to take away for this week. But the Sunday ritual is where both of these things move from cognitive into the body. So it's kind of like the intellectual felt, right? What you feel. So this week's theme was about identity autopsy, which means that this week at some point you may have been asked to look at the story you're running, the one underneath your professional narrative, the one that your default mode network, it really hums to itself in the background of everything you do. That work can be confronting, right? Not really dramatically so, but more like crisis level confrontation, right? There's a particular discomfort that comes with honesty, with examining a story that you've been living for years and years and years. So it kind of gives you a slight vertigo, right? A little bit of dizziness. You have a tendency to want to skip the hard question, right? And land on the reassuring answer. So this morning is not for skipping, but it's for gentleness. So we'll go into the material together. We're going to go slowly. A little bit of breath work, thought, some words on the page, right? And the nervous system gets to arrive before the mind really gets to analyze it. So that's the sequence that we try to do each and every week. And that's what really makes it land. So set up wherever you think is best. Sitting is preferable to lying down if you want to stay awake, but lie down if you want to lie down. If your body needs that rest today, then go ahead and do it. And have something to write with, right? Get your journal or your piece of paper and pen. Have something warm to drink if that's part of your Sunday ritual. Turn your phone face down, right? Because the scroll will still be there after we finish this session. So right now, it only requires you. So I want to start today by telling you something that might reframe the entire way you think about this work when we're going through it in April, which is what we're doing today. How we start our Sunday sets the tone for our entire week. So welcome to the Sunday Morning Club, the show dedicated to intentional living and personal growth. I'm Faye Chappell, and on behalf of all of us here at Elevated Living, I invite you to take this time for yourself to find your center and fill up your cup. I'm so glad you're here. Here's the thing that nobody tells you about identity. It's not a fixed thing. It's a discoverable thing. You don't find your identity by looking hard enough inward at some essential truth about who you really are. Your identity is something you've been constructing, right? Out loud, in the dark, consciously, entirely without knowing it, since that first time that someone reached out to you in a way that made you kind of adjust yourself, right? And that adjustment was really the beginning of the story. There's a psychologist named Dan McAdams, and he spent 30 years studying what he calls narrative identity, the theory that we don't have just identities, we build them like stories. So we take those raw materials of our lives, the things that happened to us, things we chose, the things we survived, and we arrange that material into this narrative, right? So we give ourselves kind of a character, and we give that character those consistent traits. So we give the story a tone, triumphant or tragic or resilient or cautious, and then we live inside that story as if it's simply truth about who we are. But it isn't just truth, it's an interpretation. Here's the part that really matters, because for most of us, we're doing this this month. We're trying to look at that interpretation, right, which was largely assembled when we didn't really know any better. We had less power, less perspective, and really we depended more on people's approvals than you do right now watching this. So, as we've discussed in the past, your brain has a region called that default mode network, right? And you've heard me talk about it in these other episodes or in podcasts or anywhere you're following me. And it's that neural network that activates when you're not engaged with a specific external task. So when you're in the shower, right? When you're driving somewhere, maybe you're lying in bed just before you sleep. What does it do during all that quiet time? It kind of narrates you, right? It replays the past. It constructs the future. And this is the crucial part that I really want you to take away. It maintains that continuous sense of who you are. It's kind of your internal biographer, right? And like most biographers, it works primarily with just the sources it already has. That whatever you've established in the past, what you've agreed to is your version of you, which means that unless you deliberately and consciously and consistently introduce new material to that narrator, a new way of framing a chapter, a new interpretation of an outcome, then who you are now rather than who you were might not necessarily jive, right? That default mode network will keep telling the same story over and over again, not because it's mean or full of malice or anything other than it's efficient. And the brain is an efficiency machine, so it prefers to know the path. So the identity autopsy is how you find out what the known path is. So what the record says, which chapters are being cited so often, and whether they're being cited accurately anymore. So this morning, we're not doing the full autopsy. We did that in many other places, but we're going to go deeper into something a little different. So this morning, we're going to do something a little gentler and in some ways a little more fundamental, because we're making contact with that story. Just contact, not analysis, not rewriting, not fixing it. We're just going to see what it is, right? Just here it is. That is what I'm carrying. Let me feel its actual weight, right? Rather than actually carrying it automatically without registering it, right? Let's know what we are saying to ourselves. It sounds pretty simple, not always easy, but it's where everyone starts. So let's begin. Before we do anything else, before we breathe, before we think, before we write, I want you to take about a few minutes just to arrive. Not to fix anything about how you feel, just to notice what's actually here. So close your eyes if you're comfortable doing it. If not, soften your gaze downward, right? If you'd rather keep them open. I can't tell you which one is which. It's entirely up to you. So if your eyes are closed, if your gaze is downward, I want you to notice the temperature of the room you're in. Don't evaluate it, just register it. Warm? Is it cool? Somewhere in between? Is the temperature, is this the first piece of information your nervous system has, is regulating about safety? Is that what's happening? Because that's usually what happens, right? So whatever it is, I want you to know and just welcome it. This is what it is. So when you've registered the temperature, I want you to notice the sounds around you. Whatever is present, outside, inside, distant, near. You don't need to identify every source. I want you to just let your hearing open out like a field rather than a focus beam. I want you to receive that soundscape of this particular Sunday morning without trying to screen any of it. It's one of those practices that I teach when we do walking meditations. And if you want to know more about that, you can just DM me. But think about everything you're hearing. Give yourself a few minutes. Continue. Give yourself a few minutes. Don't want you to hurry it. Now, I want you to come into the body itself. I want you to start at the top of your head. Is there any tension there? Is there a low-grade tightening or a sense of effort being held? I just want you to notice it. Don't try to release it. Just register what you're feeling. And then I want you to move your attention down to your jaw, into your face. For a lot of people, the jaw carries more than they realize, right? That slightly clenched muscle, it's kind of like an unspoken sentence, right? It's a held in word. It's that thing that was decided not to. Makes sense. And notice where that is, without judgment, without a story about it, just physical information. Now I want you to think about your throat and your neck. The throat is interesting for this work because the throat is where the story and the body meet, right? It's that passage through which that narrative leaves you and enters the world. So a lot of people, they carry something in their throat around identity. So it might be a tightness or guardedness, right? The sensation of really having learned somewhere along the way to be careful about what comes out, right? You know, we've heard that, you know, be careful what you say. And then that sort of lives in your body. So I just want you to notice whether anything is there. You don't have to name it. You're just acknowledging its presence. Now we're moving into the chest, the heart space. I want you to notice without any performance here, without trying to feel something you don't, whether the chest feels open or contained, whether there's any sense of holding here, because the chest is where we carry the stories that we're not really ready to tell people, right? The ones that feel too large or too private or too uncertain to give it names. So whatever is there, just welcome it. This room, this hour, this time, you're just going to hold it. That's it. Now let's move into the belly. We're going to soften it. The belly tends to really tighten when we're asking more of ourselves than we're willing to admit. So I want you to let it soften slightly on the next exhale. Not all the way, just soften, relax. Now take one breath in through the nose, slowly, all the way down, and let it out through your mouth. Long, unhurried, like settling something down. Okay, we do all that because you're here. Whatever was pulling at you 10 minutes ago is still there. And it's still there in 40 minutes. Right now, this is the only place you need to be. So, we're going to do a little bit of breath work. We're going to do some extended box breathing, okay? So, as many rounds as you feel necessary. Do 4, do 12. Why we're doing this, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the science behind it if you're new here. I want to explain what you're doing with the breath before we do it, because understanding that mechanism makes it more powerful, not less powerful, okay? So you're not being asked to trust in something mysterious. You're being asked to use your own nervous system deliberately, which you already know how to do. You've never been taught that you know how, right? So the breathing pattern we're using today is called box breathing or tactical breathing in some circles, because it was originally developed for high stress military and emergency concepts where the nervous system needed to be rapidly regulated without any external tools, right? It has a structure. It's 4 counts in, 4 counts hold, 4 counts out, 4 counts hold. It's a perfect square. That's why we call it a box breath, right? So when you extend and exhale and introduce deliberate breath holds, you kind of activate that vagus nerve, the longest nerve in the body, and it runs from the brainstem right down through the heart and the lungs and the gut. And that vagus nerve is the primary pathway of the nervous system. So it's your rest and digest kind of mode as opposed to fight or flight. So when the vagal tone increases, your heart rate variability improves, right? And so everything kind of gets back online and everything quiets down. So what this means practically, the kind of honest, curious self-reflection we're doing today in the journaling section requires really a regulated nervous system. So if your threat detection center is running at any level of activism, right? And for most people arriving at Sunday morning from a full week, it is your brain really will produce self-protective thinking rather than honest thinking, right? And it'll give you kind of a defended version, not really the true version. So 10 minutes of box breathing really changes that, right? It just helps you settle. So this is not a spiritual practice for its own sake. This is really preparation. We're preparing the ground for the deeper work so that it lands, basically. So I want you to sit comfortably with your spine roughly upright, enough that you can breathe freely, okay? Hands resting in your lap or on your knees, shoulders dropped, jaw unclenched if you notice is clenched, okay? And we're going to do a few rounds, and I'll guide you for the first 3 slowly, and then settle into kind of a quieter presence for any remaining rounds you want. You can stop the recording or the live and do as many as you want. And if you lose count, it's okay. Find the rhythm again, whatever you notice that you stopped or drifted or did whatever. The drifting isn't really a failure. It's returning. That is the key to the practice, right? So let's begin. So I'm going to inhale through the nose slowly, and I want you to fill from the belly upward, belly first, then the ribs expanding outward, then the chest rising, and I want you to do it for 4 counts. So inhaling through the nose, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4. Don't grip. Just a soft suspension. Top of the breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale through the nose. Slowly parted lips if that's more comfortable. Slow and complete 4 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold at the bottom. I'm going to empty your lungs and don't force it. Just pause before the next inhale. So we're going to do 4 counts. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Let's do it again. Inhaling 1, 2, 3, 4. Holding 1, 2, 3, 4. Out 1, 2, 3, 4. Holding 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, inhale 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4. Out 2, 3, 4. And hold 2, 3, 4. Good. You have the pattern. So I want you to continue on your own for as many rounds, 4, 9, whatever it is you want. I'll be here. So if a thought arrives about the week, about the story, about something unfinished or unresolved, let it arrive and let it go as you exhale. Don't suppress it, right? Acknowledge and release. Acknowledge and release. The thoughts that will be available to you on the other side of the breath, that's where we want to go. So right now, I just want you to breathe, okay? That's all I want you to do. Again, continue with your box breathing as long as you want. And when you're done, I want you to let the breath return to its natural rhythm. Don't regulate it anymore. Just breathe normally and notice the quality of your attention, that slight settling, that feeling, if it arrived, right, of having a little more room in the body than you had before you started doing this. This is the nervous system that you'll bring to journaling, right? This is that regulated, spacious, slightly softer version of your nervous system, the version that can handle honest questions because it's not in that threat decision mode. Okay, so remember this box breathing whenever you need to settle. So when you're ready, I want you to take out your journal and something to write with because we're going in. Okay, but before that, I want you a word about how to use these prompts that we're going to talk about, right? I always say prompts, they're just questions because you have to approach them as correctly as much as you write. So the first instinct for most people is they're used to performing competence, right? You're used to writing the answer that sounds the best, the most insightful answer, right? The one that demonstrates growth and clarity and awareness, right? I want to gently ask you to resist that instinct today because these prompts are not looking for your best answer. They're looking for your truest one. The truest answer is often a little less polished, right? It might feel almost embarrassingly simple. And it might feel like something you should have moved past by now, right? And it might arrive as a single word or as a body sensation before any words form at all. So write that, whatever comes first, okay? The edited version is the one that keeps the old story running. So we want the unedited version because that's where the information lives. So when you give yourself 2 or 3 minutes per prompt or per question, or just stop and write when you need to, right? And I'll give you a gentle cue to move on. And if a prompt doesn't resonate, I want you to skip it and stay with the one that does, because this isn't a test. You're not submitting the answers to me. There are no correct answers, okay? So let's begin. Let's start with prompt 1, which I'd like to call the origin of the story, okay? So at the top of the page, I want you to write, the story I most consistently tell about why I am where I am. Write that down. The story I most consistently tell about why I am where I am. And I want you to write the answer, not the LinkedIn version, not the version you tell at dinner parties when you want to really seem like you have it together, right? The version that plays in your head at 11 p.m. when the house is quiet and you're being honest with yourself, right? Is it a story of choices you made, circumstances that happened to you, right? Things that happened to you? Is it momentum that built or momentum that was interrupted? It might be a story about being underestimated or about having exceeded expectations, or a story of something that was taken from you, right? Or something you took for yourself. So I want you to really think about this and notice the role that you give yourself in the story. Are you the author, the one making the deliberate choices? Or are you the protagonist, the one that things happen to? Or are you the supporting character in someone else's more important narrative? There's no shame in any of these. I just want you to notice which one is running. And notice, when does the story peak? Is there a high point somewhere in that past or in the future, right? Or this is rare, or is it right now, right? So I want you to write 2, 3 minutes. Just write anything you want. Don't lift the pen. Just write whatever arrives and stop the recording here and do it. 2, 3 minutes. Okay, prompt number 2. This is the current chapter. So now I want you to write this. The chapter I am actually living right now is, it's not the chapter you're supposed to be in, not the chapter you're working towards. This is the one you're actually in today, on this Sunday morning, as this version of yourself at this particular moment in your life. So I want you to describe it as if you're writing it for a reader who doesn't know you at all. What's the setting? What's the central tension? What's the thing that requires your attention and energy right now? What is this chapter trying to really resolve? And then, do this. Does this chapter feel like the center of your story? Or does it feel like a transition between 2 more important chapters? This distinction really matters. I want you to think about it, because a lot of people in reinvention, which is what this is all about, are living in a chapter they're unconsciously labeled interim, right? As though the real story is happening somewhere else in a chapter that hasn't begun yet. And if that's true for you, then write it down, because naming the chapter you're treating as interim is the first step to deciding whether it deserves to be more than that. Go ahead and write. Prompt number 3. Let's talk a little bit about the inherited chapters. This is a harder one. So I want you to take a cleansing breath before you start. Top of the page. The part of the story that was written by someone else's voice. And that is what? Because every story carries chapters that were authored, at least in part, by somebody else, right? A parent's particular fear about what was and wasn't safe for you, for example, or a teacher's assessment that arrived at a time that was really formative for you, right? And so you got stuck. Or a manager's feedback that landed during maybe a vulnerable time and you just never quite let it go, or a relationship, right? That revised your sense of your own value in a direction that you really didn't choose. Like anything that was out of your control or that happened and you weren't even aware of how it changed your life. It could be something broader too, like a cultural voice, right? That unspoken consensus about, for example, about women of a certain age in a certain industry with a certain history who aren't taken seriously for doing something, right? Or a particular story the culture has about professional reinvention at midlife, right? Whether it's framed as failure or bravery, instability or inspiration, you absorbed that version of yourself. It's in there somewhere, right? So write about one chapter, just one, where you can hear a voice that isn't yours. That you don't really have to know whose voice it is. You don't have to even resolve it today. I just want you to understand, where does that story start to feel like it's running a script that someone else handed you? A lot of it is out of our control and a lot of it is subconscious. So really think about if something happened to you that is narrating your script and you're still holding on to it. A lot of the work we do in midlife reinvention is, a lot of people say, I'm retired now and so I just have to find something to do. That's not what it's about, right? If that's a social or cultural prompt that is telling you have to do that. You don't. What you want to do is, what is influencing you that was out of your voice, out of your control? Okay, prompt number 4, the gap, okay? So write this down. The gap between who I say I'm becoming and how I'm actually showing up today is what? This one is really asking you for real honesty, right? And it's not to beat you down. It's just clear-eyed honesty. Because most people who are really genuine in reinvention, they carry this gap, right? There's a version of themselves that they're working towards, right? Maybe more confident, maybe more visible, maybe deliberately expressing themselves, right? And then there's this version that actually shows up in the room that they walk into, right? The version that still reaches for the past tense. It still gives that credential reach introduction, right? It still pre-apologizes basically for asserting an opinion in certain rooms. So where is your gap? Not as a source of shame, basically like a data point, right? Because the gap is not evidence of a failure. The gap is the exact location of your work. The gap is where reinvention is actually happening right now, imperfectly, as it should be, right? So I want you to write down what you see in that gap, specifically not anything that says, I need to be more confident, because that's too vague, right, to be useful. More specific might be, I still shrink in rooms with senior men. I still describe my current work as less important than my previous work, right? Oh, I'm only doing this. I used to be this. I still wait to be invited rather than declaring myself, right? It's the thing that you actually work with. So really important to take some time and be honest about where that gap lies, right? Because if you don't identify it, you kind of step back from reinvention, right? Okay, the final prompt. This is your declaration, right? This is the one that goes in a different direction from the previous ones we just worked on. So I want you to write what I actually know to be true about who I am right now in this present tense, regardless of what the old story says is. This is kind of a counter narrative, right? Not a wishful declaration, not a future inspiration. It's present tense. It's a present tense truth that the old story has been kind of obscuring or underselling, right? So what do you know with whatever confidence you can access on this Sunday morning about who you are right now? What capability is genuinely present regardless of whether it's been recognized by the rooms you've been in, right? What wisdom has come directly from the chapters you've survived, essentially, right? What is the thing that actually is true about you today, that would surprise the person who wrote the character you've been living as? Ooh, right? I want you to write it in the first person, in the present tense. So I am someone who, I know how to, I bring, I have built. I want it to be slightly bigger than comfortable. Does that make sense? Let it be more like you'd say out loud in most rooms, right? Let it be more than that. Because the room you're in right now is safe, right? And the statement you're reaching for, the one that feels one size a little too large, that's probably the accurate size. That's the one that the default mode network has been underselling, okay? And I want you to write it all down for a few minutes and don't edit it. Don't edit it down to something more modest. I want you to write the real one, the big one, the one that gets you to where you need to be. And when you do that, set your pen down whenever you're ready. Take a breath. Look at what you've written. Not to analyze it, not yet. Just to acknowledge that it exists, that you wrote something true on a Sunday morning. And it's not nothing. That's actually the whole point, right? So let's think about where your story lives in your body, right? And why the body matters here. Because I want to spend a few minutes on something that doesn't get enough attention to really identity work and what we're doing. It's the fact that stories don't only live in the mind, they actually live in the body. So somatic psychology has been demonstrating for decades what many of us know kind of intuitively, that emotional and psychological material, including that narrative, including identity, it gets encoded in our body, right? The shoulders carry a particular history of kind of over responsibility. The chest holds that unlived grief, right, of a chapter that wasn't really honored. And the gut clenches in certain rooms because the body recognized the threat, right, before the mind did. That's why sometimes people say, I'm sick to my stomach when they go to a networking event, right? Because they are acknowledging a threat, and the gut is feeling it before the mind even acknowledges it. So Peter Levine, who developed somatic experiencing, talks about how unprocessed experience stays in the body as incomplete motor responses, right? So that physical impulse to fight or to flee that was never expressed was held in suspension in the tissue, right? We're not going to get to clinical territory here. That's not what I'm doing this morning, but I want you to understand the principle applies at a gentler level too. So the stories we carry leave traces in our body, right? I think everyone acknowledges that now. And sometimes the body can tell us things about our story that the conscious mind still is trying to defend, right? So here's what I want you to do. I want you to think of the current story that you wrote about in the first prompt, right? The story that you most consistently tell about where you are and why. And I want you to hold it gently in your mind. Don't analyze it. Just hold that thought. Now do a slow scan through the body and ask the simple question. Where does this story live? Physically, where does it register? Is it the chest, the throat, the belly, the jaws, shoulder? Is it a particular kind of bracing or a readiness or a steady state? And when you find a place, and most people find at least one, don't try to change it. Don't try to release it. Breathe through it. Don't breathe through it or fix it. I just want you to put your attention there gently, like placing kind of a warm hand on the spot, right? And notice what happens when you do. Because sometimes the tissue softens slightly. Sometimes it tightens before it softens. And sometimes nothing happens at all. And that's fine too. I just want you to stay there for a few breaths and acknowledge it. Because that's where the story lives in you. Okay, think about that. So when you talk about some story, if all of a sudden you feel that tension somewhere, you know where it lives. It might be in your throat and your voice, in your throat and your jaw, and the story might be there because you don't want to talk about it. You don't want to acknowledge it out loud. I just want you to acknowledge where your story lives. Now, I want you to think of the declaration you made in the last prompt, right? The present tense truth about who you are. That slightly bigger one, right? That one that we want it to be the more accurate one. So where does that live in the body, and how different does it feel? Does it sit somewhere else? I want you to really notice the difference between those two physical states, the old story and the current truth, because they may be very, very different, right? And they often do feel different. The new story often sits higher in the body because it's more open. It's a little more space around the heart. The old story kind of is denser, lower, more contracted usually, right? You don't do anything with this information right now. You just register it. The body knows direction. It knew before you even started this ritual, right? It's been trying to tell you for a long time where it is. So this week, I want to give you one very simple somatic breath practice to carry forward. So once a day, whether you're in the car, you're in the shower, in a quiet moment before the meeting that you have to go into, I want you to take 30 seconds. That's it. I'm not asking you a lot. And ask your body, where am I holding the old story right now? And just scan it. Just locate it. Don't try to release it or fix it. Just notice it. Name where it is and acknowledge it, because that's the first step. And that is the whole practice. And it's more powerful than it sounds, because what we locate, we can eventually work with. What runs invisibly in the body runs us. And what we can see, we can choose to set down. Okay, so we're almost done. I want to spend a few minutes just integrating what you're learning. So I don't want you to rush to get done with your day, but I want you to acknowledge what's happening here this morning. You did something that most people don't do. Most people spend Sunday morning in that comfortable numbness of scrolling, right? Or managed busyness of, oh, I got to do this list today. Or maybe that performed version of rest that doesn't actually restore anything, because it never goes anywhere near the things that actually need attention, right? So you came here, you breathe, you wrote honestly, you let the body be part of the conversation, and that's not small. So here's what I want you to leave with today. The thing I keep coming back to when I think about identity autopsy, and really what it asks of people, right? The story you've been living, whatever you found in your journal today, whatever the honest version was, that story wasn't wrong. It was doing something real. It was protecting you through seasons that needed protection. It carried you through chapters that required that particular kind of armor, that particular kind of character, just to be able to get through it. And even the parts of the story that limit you now, they were exactly right for the version of your life that is genuinely over now. So the fact that the story once served you and no longer does is not the reason for shame. It's a reason for gratitude and for reason for change, both at the same time, right? That scaffold isn't the building, right? It was always there to just keep you up when you needed to. You are the building, and the building doesn't need scaffolding anymore. It doesn't need it forever anyway. It needs scaffolding while they're going up, and then they need the scaffolding to come down so the structure finally can be seen, right? So this month, in the month of April, it's the beginning of that, not the completion of it. It's the beginning. So this morning was a real beginning, something small, but structured shift, right? That happened today. You may not feel it dramatically, right? But when you look back at this April, this morning will have mattered if you did all the work. If you're just listening to me, stop, go back and do the work, okay? And take your time coming back to the room, because there's no rush. Look out the window if there's one near you. Let the transition from internal to external be gradual, okay? Okay. If you follow me on LinkedIn, the Spark newsletter drops tomorrow morning. This week's episode is in your feed. If you haven't listened to this and you're listening to me later, it's kind of weird to say that. The podcast and the newsletter, or the YouTube video and the newsletter, everything goes hand in hand during the week. So if you listen to my podcast, or you read my newsletter or Substack, or do the Sunday morning ritual, they all go together, right? And so some of them go deeper into everything we touched today, but bring what you wrote this morning if you're listening to anything else, because all the pieces work together and talk to each other. So for example, our membership in our community, in our inner circle, we go even deeper into this work. So everything every month coincides so that it's a cohesive learning as we go. All right. And next Sunday, we're going to go into what I call the language trap. And that's the specific words and verb tenses that are really encoding that old story into your daily life without you even being aware of it. So we're going to build on what you found today. So I'll be here each and every week. Go have your Sunday. You've earned it. Thank you for joining us, and I can't wait to see you again. And with that, our time together comes to a close. Thank you for showing up for yourself today. Take that feeling of this space with you and let it guide your actions and reactions this week. I'm Faye Chappell. On behalf of everyone here at Elevated Living, I'm wishing you a week of profound peace and clarity.